And as I walk off into the city streets, a final word to the men and women of the Reagan Revolution, the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work that brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time. We made a difference. We made the city stronger. We made the city freer. And we left her in good hands. All in all, not bad. Not bad at all. And so, goodbye. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
President Ronald Reagan, from January 11th, 1989, in his final Oval Office address to the American people. We're back now on America's Forum. We're rejoined by our friend Ellis Hennigan from Newsmax New York as he pulls co-hosting duty. And the speech that we just heard from President Reagan has an impact even today, but it was the policies and the history made by the 40th president that we remember on today, what would be his 104th birthday. And to remember Reagan, a guy who has spent a lot of time not only remembering but recording what the president did and how it influenced our politics and our history, our friend Craig Shirley. He is the president of Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs and the author of Reagan's Revolution, the untold story of the campaign that started it all. Craig, it's so good to have you back on America's Forum, and on this, what would be Ronald Reagan's 104th birthday. Why does he still matter?
Well, that's an excellent question, JD. I think he matters because he's relevant even today. He was certainly relevant in his time. There was a liberal historian by the name of John Patrick Diggins, who was in many ways the unofficial historian of the American left in the 20th century. He was at Berkeley and actually did battle with then Governor Reagan. Diggins was part of the free speech movement, and he'd written books about the labor movement and the women's movement and the environmental movement. But his last book, this liberal historian, his last book was Ronald Reagan, Fate, Freedom, and the Making of History. And this historian came to the conclusion that Ronald Reagan was one of our four greatest presidents. The criteria that Diggins used was that what made a president great was did he save or free many, many people. And so he concluded that George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, and Ronald Reagan were our four greatest presidents. So, and James McGregor Burns, who just passed away, who was the historian for Franklin Roosevelt, he also said he would put Reagan in the great or near great category. So when you have liberal historians saying this about Ronald Reagan, I think it gives us all pause to really shed our ideology and our personal biases and strip away all that and just simply look at the fact of the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and one has to conclude that he was an extremely successful president.
Well, Craig Shirley, there is no doubt that Reagan casts a long shadow until today and beyond. But let me tell you what I find particularly interesting these days is how often folks on my side of the aisle are quoting Ronald Reagan on taxes, on immigration, on relationships with the other party, the Tip O'Neill-Ronald Reagan relationship. As you look at the politics in your city, what?
I was going to say, they certainly wouldn't quote Jimmy Carter, would they?
No, that's true. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because as you look at the folks in the party today, in the Republican Party, boy, Ronald Reagan almost looks like a moderate compared to where some in the Republican Party are today.
I've been through this many times. I reject that out of hand. Reagan.
Okay, what about the three issues I just cited for you?
And he governed as a conservative. Did he do things that conservatives opposed him on? Sure, he did. But he also recognized what he would do, what he could do, and the other things he would try to minimize. He did the 82 TEFRA bill with Tip O'Neill, and the agreement was with O'Neill was that it was going to close some of the loopholes in the 81 tax bill, which was the great tax cutting act that he signed, the historical signing in August 1981. It would close some loopholes, it would raise taxes, but in exchange, O'Neill would deliver $3 in spending cuts for every $1 that Reagan delivered in tax cuts. Well, guess what? The tax cuts came The spending cuts never came, and Reagan vowed, and he said so in his autobiography, he never made another deal like that again with Tip O'Neill, and he didn't make another deal like that with Tip O'Neill. So he made a mistake. He acknowledged he made a mistake on the issue of immigration. I've said this many times, is that everything Reagan did in his presidency must be judged in the shadow of the Cold War. By 1986, we were finally winning the Cold War. The 3 million illegals who were here were many were political refugees from communist Cuba, communist Nicaragua, and the communist terrorists in El Salvador. Reagan wasn't about to send these people back who were here for political reasons, which is perfectly legal or encouraged by U.S. policy at the time.
Gentlemen, we only have two minutes and 20 seconds.
Public relations bonanza by sending these people back.
2 minutes and 20 seconds remain. Let's bring in another voice, another man who joins us here quite often on America's Forum. That would be Michael Reagan, the son of Ronald Reagan. Listen to what he had to say, then we'll get your reaction to this, Craig.
When my father won in 1980, you might remember, he was the only conservative running in a sea of Republican moderates. He split the vote with no one. It seems that nobody's learned from those days, and we need to learn how you win the nomination. You win it a lot by not putting 8 people on the stage who are trying to be more Reagan than Reagan.
But will people still try to be more Reagan than Reagan, Craig? Minute 30 remains.
Yes, they will, JD, because it's the obvious path forward, is that he is, to date, at least in our lifetime, the most successful Republican nominee and successful Republican president to be elected outright in his own right, and not to inherit the presidency or having it bequeathed to him. So Michael is absolutely right, is that Reagan formulated a political strategy that was appealing to both populist Republicans in the primaries and populist Democrats in the general, which is why he got, in 1980, 1 in 3 Democratic voters when he was running against Carter in the general election.
And we will have to leave it there, though our friend Ellis even attests to the fact that many on his side of the aisle quote Ronald Reagan. The name of the book, Reagan's Revolution, the untold story of the campaign that started it all. Craig, Shirley, thanks so much for spending some time with Ellis and me, reminiscing about the 40th president and also offering thoughts about what will happen in the campaign ahead. Well, you know that from time to time, Ellis and I have some rambunctious discussions. Well, as it turns out, we're going to invite in somebody else to really take on Ellis. Liz Peek will offer her perspective from the right, Ellis Hinniken his unalloyed perspective from the left, as they square off in debate following this Newsmax Now update.